Hi, Luke. All right, so we are going to do 9-1. I'm going to move my camera back a little bit. As soon as I hit record, it always like zooms up a little bit on me. 9-1 equivalent fraction. So get that copied in your notebook and open up to that page in your textbook. And I've got a few pictures here for you to copy. So copy these 4 pictures. So you might want to pause it for a minute. Okay, copy these 3 pictures. Try to copy them just like I have them. Okay, that's going to be pretty important. So try your best to copy them just like I have them in your notebook, and we're going to talk about them. So if you need to pause and do that, go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're going to talk about equivalent fractions, but before we do that, I just want to do a little bit of review about what is a fraction. Okay, so a fraction is always, the way I always talk about in class, is part over a whole. Okay. Okay, basically a fraction is a equal part of something. Okay, so we'll put that definition down first. Equal part of something. Okay, equal part of something. And like I said, I always talk about fraction being part over whole. Okay, now a key word in that definition is equal. It has to be an equal part of something. So one of these 3 pictures is not split up into equal parts. You tell which one it is? Yeah, this guy. It's not equal parts. This part is not as big as this part. They're different sizes. So I could not, well, I'll get to it in a minute. We know this one isn't equal parts, but let's talk about our other 2 pictures first. So how about this guy? If I would color in one part, what fraction of that circle did I color in? I hate that this is kind of like cutting off my head. Let me try to smooth it a little bit. Okay, if I color in one piece, what fraction is that? Well, what part is colored in? What part is colored in? 1. And how many parts are there all together? 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to include the one that's colored in. Don't say it's 1 over 3. It's part over whole, not part over the rest. Okay, so the part that's colored in is 1. How many parts are there all together? 4. Okay, so how much is colored in? 1/4. Okay, let's look at this guy. Okay, now let's color in 3 parts. Okay, so again, fraction is part over whole. So what part is colored in? 3. How many parts are there all together? 1, 2, 3, 4. Part over whole. Okay, now what if I colored in one piece on this one? I said fraction is part over whole, so can't I say that 1/3 is colored in? And no, I can't, because like I said, these sections are not equal. Each section is not the same size, so I can't say that. Okay, so that is not really a third. Okay, so I can't say that. Okay, so that's kind of a little review about what a fraction is. It's always part over whole. All right. Okay. So next thing we're going to do is talk about equivalent fractions. So hopefully by now someone got into school to pick up stuff for you, because I left you a set of fraction strips. Okay, so I want you to pause here if you don't have those fraction strips and get them out. Okay, so what I want you to do, okay, I'm going to draw just an example on the board. Okay, so if I had my fraction strip that equals 1/2, okay, I could also line up with that 1/2 perfectly, and that might be really small for you to see. Let me get you closer. Woo, woo, woo. I'm not very spatial. Okay, here we go. You can see down here, I have a 1/4 and a 1/4, and they line up perfectly equally with 1/2. Okay, so that in your notebook, you could make that, and then what I want you to write down is, in your notebook, 1/2 equals, 2/4. 1/2 equals 2/4, because there's 1/2 and there's 2 of the 4ths. Okay, and that would be a match, and you would write that in your notebook. Okay, now what that is, let me tell you what that is before I launch you off on a little assignment with your fraction strips. That is showing me equivalent fractions. Okay, that's showing me equivalent fractions, because do you see how those 2 are naming the same amount? So imagine this is a chocolate bar. This 1/2 is a chocolate bar. And these 1/4 are each 2 pieces of chocolate bar. Do you see how if you ate the 1/2 or if you ate the 2/4, you would be eating the same amount of chocolate? But they're called different things. That's called 1/2 and that's called 2/4. Those are called equivalent fractions. They're two different fractions that name the same amount. Okay? So that's our definition there. Two different fractions that name the same amount. Okay, so if you need to pause and copy that, pause and copy that. Equivalent fractions are two different fractions that name the same amount. This would be an example of an equivalent fraction. Okay, now you can't use my example, that's my example, but I want you to use the fraction strips and I want you to come up with 4 more. Lay them all out on your table, 4 more, and I want you to try to draw them like that and then label. Okay, they have to match up perfectly. So if you have a pair and like one sticks out a little too much farther at the end, nope, that doesn't count. They have to match up perfectly like these do. Okay, so you need to come up with 4 more matches with your fraction strips at home and draw them and label them in your notes. Okay, and then pause this before we go on to the next part. All right. Hopefully you are back and you came up with 4 more pairs of equivalent fractions. Okay, so now that you've seen that and you can literally see with your eyeballs that these are different fraction amounts that name, different fraction names that name the same amount, I want to talk about it a little more, because if I want to make an equivalent fraction in math, I don't want to always have to get out my fraction strips. That's not very convenient. Okay, it's nice to start with, but it's not convenient in the big picture. So let's look at that example that I was working with you before, that 1/2 equals 2/4. Now, do you see, and you look at all your other examples that you made too, okay? I'm going to put another example up here that I would guess maybe that you have in your notes, and that's 1/2 equals 3/6. Sorry, I switched to green because my black was kind of dying there. 1/2 equals 3/6. Can you see any mathematical pattern to these fractions, like any math thing going on here that maybe would help us be able to figure out an equivalent fraction without using fraction strips? Well, maybe you have, and if you were in class, we'd talk a little bit about that and you'd get everybody else's ideas, but since you're at home and you've got just like me in this video and you've got mom there too, we're going to talk about it. So do you see how if I would take this, and maybe I'll switch to a different color to make it stand out. If I would take both the top and the bottom number here and multiply them by 2, I would get my fraction over here. So 1 times 2 is 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. I multiplied both by 2, and I got my equivalent fraction. Okay, so thinking about that, what could I do to this guy down here? Okay, what could I do to that guy? Yeah, I could do times 3. And I would have 3/6. So that's my mathematical trick. It has to be multiplying or dividing, because this also works the other direction. So let's look at one this way. Maybe you have this one in your notes. 4/8 equals 1/2. Well, now I'm not multiplying, but could I divide? Divided by 4, divided by 4 to get 1/2? Yeah. Okay, so I can make an equivalent fraction as long as I multiply we didn't talk about that, numerator and denominator. Remember, in a fraction, the top number is always called the numerator. I should have done that at the beginning. And the bottom number is called the denominator. Okay, so when I throw those terms out, I'm sure you've heard those before, but we got to review it. Numerator, denominator. Okay, as long as I multiply or divide the numerator and denominator by the same number, I will always get an equivalent fraction. They will be just different ways of saying the same amount. So let's try that with one example that probably isn't in your notebook. Okay, let's do 3/5. And I'm going to say to you, okay, Luke, tell me if an equivalent fraction for 3/5. And you are going to say, well, what do I want to multiply or divide this fraction by? And you get to pick. Okay, well, there's nothing I can divide 3 and 5 by evenly, except for 1, and that doesn't really count. So what do I want to multiply it by? Let's multiply them both by 3. Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 5 times 3 is 15. Well, that tells me that 3/5 and 9/15 are equivalent fractions. They are two different ways of saying the same amount. Okay, what if I said, give me another equivalent fraction for 3/5? It's different than 9/15. And we'd say, okay, well, maybe now I'm going to multiply them both by 4. And that's going to give me 12 over 20. Okay, well, then I could say 3/5 is also equal to 12/20. Okay, those are also equivalent fractions. I could do both the numerator and the denominator times 5, or times 6, or times 119. Okay, as long as I multiply the numerator and the denominator times the same thing, I'll get an equivalent fraction. Or divide. Let's say I have the fraction 12/16, and I say to give me an equivalent fraction. Well, I can multiply them both by 2 or 3 or anything. What if I want to divide? I could divide them both by 2, and I would get 6 over 8. So that would tell me that 12/16 is equivalent to 6 over 8. Now, I could also divide them both by 4. So I could say that 12/16 is equivalent to 3/4. Okay, so those are two equivalent fractions I can make by dividing. You can use dividing or multiplying. You cannot add or subtract because it will not give you an equal amount. And you could see that with your fraction strips. I'm not going to put an example up here, but you could see that with your fraction strips. If you added the same numbers to the numerator and the denominator, it won't make a matching pair with your fraction strips. It wouldn't be equal amounts. Only multiplying and dividing, okay? All right, what I want you to do is I want you to try just maybe number 3 and 4 under guided practice. Try number 3, well, you know what, never mind. I mean, you can, but then you have to have mom check them because those are like, you could have a whole ton of different answers. So try guided practice 3 and 4, but have mom look at them for you and tell you if you're right or not, or whoever's around, because I really can't. It could be a whole wide range of answers that could be correct, okay? All right, hope you're doing well. I will hopefully see you soon, okay? We miss you. All right, talk to you later. Bye, bud. Have a good day.